Welcome to Classics Abridged, where I'm going to be reading the Iliad in the style of, well, if your childhood was anything like mine, in the style of Anna Russell's Summary of the Ring Cycle, and for the younger listeners, think of Alt Swift X, who has been doing great readings of George R. R. Martin's books. Why the Iliad for my first story? Mainly because it is old. Very old. Ancient. The setting is about 3,000 years ago, during the Bronze Age. We don't know when the story of the Iliad was first told, but it wasn't written down until it had existed for at least a few centuries, on account of written language being somewhat new to the Greeks. The great thing about the Iliad is that because of its age, and originally being an oral tradition, the storytelling is often extremely unusual. You'll see what this means as we get into the story. I should mention I'm using the Caroline Alexander translation, and it starts with this line. Wrath! Sing, goddess, of the ruinous wrath of Peleus' son Achilles. Often, in translation, the opening is just, Sing, goddess, but Caroline Alexander makes a point of putting wrath at the beginning, because that's how the poem starts in the original Greek. Literally, the first word is wrath. The word that Homer uses is manos, which has also been translated as rage and is closely related to the word mania, madness or insanity. Homer is preparing us for a person who completely loses control to his emotions and brings ruin in the process. So while Achilles is the main character, he's hardly the hero of the story. Homer also does a lot of work setting up the theme in these opening lines. Two of the overarching themes of the story are established. Achilles isn't the only person who will be ruled by his passions. Lots of people have this problem. Mortal and god alike will do foolish things out of emotion, usually anger. And the second theme is that war is a horrible thing. The characters we will meet are epic heroes, of course, but we are reminded that they will be rendered into food for dogs and birds, and that there will be woes without number for the Achaeans. Speaking of anger and woe, the story proper begins with Agamemnon, who is the son of Atreus. Homer helpfully informs us, as he will inform us for nearly everyone and everything, dealing with his own anger issues. In a short time, that will put Achilles, the greatest of the Greek warriors, against Agamemnon, who is supposed to be in charge. So, what puts these two heroes into conflict? Well, it's mainly because Agamemnon is a crazy person. See, this all starts with Agamemnon having kidnapped a woman named Chryseis. Her father, a priest of Apollo, and keep that in mind because it's going to be important, shows up to ransom her. The ransom that he offers is an impressive one, and the soldiers looking on shout that Agamemnon should accept it. Instead, he publicly threatens to kill the guy. The priest of Apollo. You won't be surprised to learn that when Apollo finds out about this, he is not pleased, and immediately sends a plague. Now, this is a mythic story, so everyone knows that plagues are sent by Apollo, a fact which might make you think that Agamemnon would quickly recognize his fuck-up. But no. He ignores it for over a week. Actually, everyone does, until Hera finally tells Achilles to get his shit together. Achilles sends for a seer to figure out what could possibly have caused this. Calchas, the most eminent of bird seers, is brought to a gathering of the Greek leadership to tell them what's going on. By the way, the god who gave Calchas the gift of prophecy was Apollo. Now, Calchas is a savvy dude, and he's not about to risk his life giving out advice to someone like Agamemnon, so the first words out of his mouth are essentially, I'm not saying a fucking word until Achilles promises to defend me against, someone important who might overreact. Achilles agrees to this, and Calchas delicately suggests that declining the ransom, and then threatening to kill a priest of Apollo, may have gotten Agamemnon on Apollo's bad side. Naturally, Agamemnon flips out at this shocking revelation and claims that Calchas is always conspiring against him. The reason for this, by the way, is that Agamemnon had previously insulted the goddess Artemis, which got him cursed by Artemis, something he didn't figure out until Calchas explained it to him, presumably with pictures and in small words. As a side note, Calchas was also the one who guided the Greeks to Troy. That might seem like a small detail, except for the fact that he guided them to entirely the wrong city, which they then sacked before discovering their mistake. so you can imagine that didn't endear Calchas to Agamemnon either. Despite his incredulity and anger, Agamemnon agrees to return Chryseis to her father and make a big sacrifice to Apollo in order to save his men. At this point, you might be wondering when we're going to get to the part about why Achilles and Agamemnon start hating each other. Sure, Agamemnon is kind of stupid and a little unstable, but the Greeks are all like that in this story. Now, it turns out that the final straw is when Agamemnon gets so unbelievably pissed off about losing his sex slave on account of having been a dick for no reason, that he demands he be given Achilles' sex slave. This comes completely out of left field, and not just to modern readers either. Agamemnon has no basis to take Achilles' prize from him. It is emphasized that plunder taken from their raids is awarded to people by some kind of vote. Agamemnon is subverting the rules and insulting not just Achilles, but the rest of the Greek army by unilaterally taking this woman for himself. And that is what is about to bring about the ruinous wrath of Achilles. These two grown men, who are currently fighting a war together, bicker like 12-year-olds for a really needlessly long time. Achilles considers murdering Agamemnon and all of his guards, until Hera sends Athena to intervene and stop that, something that she accomplishes by promising that Agamemnon is going to stupid himself to death, which honestly shouldn't be too surprising at this point. We also in this section have the term dog-faced and dog-eyed thrown around a lot. The exact meaning of this insult appears to have been lost to time. However, we do know that it means dog-like, based on other descriptions Homer makes. The Aegean Sea is referred to as wine-dark in translation, but is more literally written as wine-faced in the original Greek, so that seems to be a standard turn of phrase. And given that we still call men who are short-sighted and either greedy or lustful dogs, that's almost certainly what Homer was going for. And what is the final consequence? Achilles goes to pout in his tent. That is the numinous rage that Homer starts the poem by informing us of. Pouting. This is significant, though, because Achilles brought a lot of troops, and they will not fight unless he personally leads them. So the Greeks have now been deprived of their greatest warrior, as well as a large portion of their war host. The woman that Achilles kidnapped is named Briseis, and she is taken away by two of Agamemnon's soldiers. Here we have to read between the lines a bit. Briseis doesn't want to go, and Achilles doesn't want to release her. So why does Briseis care? Unfortunately, since she really has no character other than having beautiful cheeks, we never find out. Why does Achilles care? Well, there are two major possibilities. Either he's in love with her, or he's just angry about having his prize taken. It seems very unlikely that he's in love with her. The almost universally male writers we have from the era did not have much positive to say about women, and truly intimate relationships are really only ever shown between men. Indeed, Achilles' closest personal relationship is with Patroclus, his friend and probably his lover. That's not to say Achilles was gay, though there are good arguments he might have been gay. Rather, it's that the Greek culture at this time expected men to have particular kinds of relationships, and there's nothing to suggest Achilles was unusual in this respect. Achilles also never says anything to suggest that he loves Briseis, while he hammers away at Agamemnon's unfairness. Of course, his reaction, openly weeping and going to hide in his tent, is pretty extreme for a guy who's just having a slave taken away. Achilles could probably just go get another slave. He sacked a bunch of cities on the way to Troy, which is how he captured Briseis in the first place. Though, given that he sacked 28 cities, maybe everyone in the area actually has fled. Still, the reason he's so upset is most likely because the insult is so grievous and unexpected, on top of the fact that there's nothing he can do, since Agamemnon is in charge. There is a third possibility, if we go a bit outside of the text, and take other ancient Greek accounts of the war as canon. According to a compendium of Greek mythology from around 200 CE, called the Library, Achilles was 15 when he gathered for war against Troy. He also did this knowing that it was prophesied he would die in that war. Between then and the start of the Iliad, 18 years pass due to various delays and their total inability to assault Troy's defenses. That means literally the majority of Achilles' life has been spent trying to fight the war that will cause his glorious death, knowing only soldiers and camp followers, with Briseis as one of his few personal companions. We could forgive him for being somewhat irrationally attached to her, despite her status as a slave. While Achilles is crying in his tent, he prays to his mother, who is a minor deity, a sea spirit named Thetis, who instantly shows up. She sympathizes with his plight and promises to seek the aid of Zeus. However, there is a slight complication. She can't help Achilles right this second because the entire Greek pantheon has gone on a road trip. That's right, Zeus and the rest of the important gods are in Ethiopia having a 12-day party. Unfortunately, we get no more details on what this entails, but it is a fantastic detail. There's also a bit of intentional humor here. Oral traditions have a lot of repetition in order to make sure that the listener can remember everything. Homer uses this meeting as an excuse for a recap of the entire plot. Yes, in the first chapter. Thetis asks her son what is going on, and Achilles complains about being forced into this cliché since she already knows all of the information. Homer, or maybe whoever transcribed the poem, is definitely winking at the audience about how unnatural this cliché is. Homer uses epithets, which are short descriptions of people, all over the Iliad as sort of motifs. And Thetis gets a very odd one. She's described as having silver feet, and it's hard to imagine that being meant literally. I've read that maybe it means she had silver sandals, but there's an explanation I prefer. As a sea spirit, Thetis might simply have had wet feet that shine like silver. It's true that's an odd use of color imagery, but Homer is often like that. He later calls the sky bronze, simply to indicate that it's bright out. After that, we get some details about the sacrifice that Odysseus makes to Apollo. Yes, the sacrifice that Odysseus makes to Apollo on behalf of Agamemnon. All the wine and blood and dancing you'd expect from Greek animal sacrifice happens, and for what it's worth, Apollo, who remember is partying in Ethiopia, hears the prayers, accepts the sacrifice, rescinds the plague, and gives Odysseus a favorable wind to return on. Once they're done with their party, the Olympians come back to their palace on Olympus of the deep snow. That's another of Homer's epithets. And Thetis asks Zeus for help. Zeus is very concerned that Hera will harass him with words of abuse if he helps Achilles, since Hera really wants the Greeks to sack Troy on account of how Paris, one of the Trojan princes, insulted her by saying that Aphrodite was more beautiful. Nonetheless, he swears an unbreakable vow to assist Thetis on getting revenge for Achilles. Hera then immediately figures out that Zeus is conspiring with Thetis against the Achaeans and harasses him with words of abuse. What follows is basically an old married couple sniping at each other. Zeus is really annoyed that Hera always suspects him of plotting stuff. Hera is annoyed that he is in fact always plotting stuff and cheating on her. The argument ultimately goes nowhere. Nobody can force Zeus to do anything, although he personally would really prefer to not have his wife upset with him, and he does try to assure her that he holds her in esteem above all others, even though he's not going to give an inch on this particular subject. The chapter closes out with the gods all going to bed and the narration informing us that Hephaestus made all of their houses. So, this is not one of the action-heavy chapters, but I promise there's some really wild combat ahead. Right now, everyone is moving into position. The gods have begun to take sides for various reasons. Zeus and Apollo are working against the Greeks, while Hera and Athena are aiding them. The Trojans aren't even relevant yet. The Greeks have managed to turn their own gods against themselves. Next time on the Iliad, everyone marches to war.